Hello, dear students. This is the first practical work on the discipline Hygienic Certification of Workplaces for students of the educational program 6B 11201, Life Safety and Environmental Protection. The topic of the first practical work is called Study of the Rules for Conducting Mandatory Periodic Certification of Production Facilities for Working Conditions. This presentation was prepared by Assistant of Mine Aerology and Labor Protection Department Исаков Бекжан Ербулатович. The purpose and the objectives of practical classes on whole discipline is training in practical skills necessary for determining the sanitary and hygienic assessment of working conditions, determining the workload, assessing the quality of working conditions, certifying workplaces, certifying workplaces for compliance with labor protection requirements, and the purpose and objectives of the first practical lesson. Training in practical skills of certification of production facilities for working conditions. Lesson plan. First, introduction to the theoretical part of the material. Then, secondly, we're gonna see the procedure for performing the work. And the last is a task for practical work. Let's start. According to the rules for conducting mandatory periodic certification of production facilities for working conditions, certification is subject to all existing jobs in the organization. So, certification includes hygienic assessment of existing working conditions, assessment of workplace injuries, and assessment of employees' availability of personal protective equipment. Certification of production facilities for working conditions is carried out at least once every 5 years from the date of the last one. Workplaces are subject to mandatory recertification after replacement of production equipment, changes in the technological process, reconstruction of collective protection equipment, or at the request of the state control bodies over the state of labor safety at work when violations are detected during the certification of workplaces. To conduct certification, a special certification commission of the enterprise is appointed, which includes chief specialists, employees of labor protection services, and the certification commissions of workshops, masters and foremen. The functions of the commission members, terms, and schedule of certification work are defined. Work on certification of workplaces by working conditions consists of 4 stages. The first stage is methodological and organizational preparation for certification. Second stage, certification. Third stage, registration of its results. And the last stage, implementation of the results of certification. If the working conditions at the workplace meet the hygienic requirements and requirements for personal protective equipment for employees, the workplace is recognized as certified. Otherwise, the working conditions at such a workplace are considered harmful or dangerous. Registration of certification results. The results of the work of the Certification Commission of the organization are made out by the Protocol of Certification of Workplaces on Working Conditions, which is accompanied by maps of certification of workplaces on working conditions, statements of workplaces, and the results of their certification in divisions, and a summary statement of the organization, an action plan for improving working conditions in the organization. The results of workplace certification for working conditions are used for planning and carrying out measures on labor protection and conditions. Certification of production facilities for compliance with labor protection requirements. Justification for granting benefits and compensation to employees engaged in heavy work and work with harmful and dangerous working conditions. Resolving the issue of the connection of the disease with the profession in case of suspicion of an occupational disease. Establishing a diagnosis of occupational disease, including when resolving disputes, disagreements in court. Consideration of the issue of termination of the operation of the shop, site, production equipment, changes in technologies that pose a direct threat to the life and or health of employees. Inclusion in the employment contract of working conditions of employees. Familiarization of employees with working conditions in the workplace. Preparation of statistical reports on the state of working conditions. Benefits and compensation for working with harmful and dangerous working conditions. And the last one, application of administrative and economic sanctions to guilty officials in connection with violation of labor protection legislation. Terms of certification are set by the organization based on changes in the condition and nature of work, but at least once every 5 years from the date of the last one. Workplaces are subject to mandatory recertification after replacement of production equipment, changes in the technological process, reconstruction of collective protective equipment, or at the request of the state examination of working conditions of the Republic of Kazakhstan when violations are detected during the certification of workplaces. Measurement parameters of dangerous and harmful production factors determine the severity and intensity of working process. Assessment of risk of injury are produced either independently laboratory departments or with assistance from third-party organizations accredited to carry out these works. The preparatory stage includes formation of the necessary regulatory and reference base for certification of workplaces, inventory of all workplaces with a list of dangerous and harmful factors of the production environment, indicators of the severity and intensity of the labor process, encoding of production facilities, workshops, sites, and workplace according to working conditions, mapping and certification of workplaces on working conditions. At the first stage, at the stage of certification, is carried out next thing. Hygienic assessment of working conditions on indicators of harm and danger environment factors, severity and intensity of the work process on the basis of comparison of measurement results of all the dangerous harmful factors with their established standards, and the definition of the class of working conditions for each location in accordance with the guidelines. Assessment of dangerous and harmful production factors at similar jobs and working conditions in the workplace based on data obtained during certification of at least 20% of such jobs. Assessment of workplace injury safety by checking the availability of safety certificates of the established sample for production equipment and compliance of production equipment, devices, and tools with the requirements of regulatory legal acts, and assigning working conditions to a certain hazard class in accordance with the classification of working conditions for injury safety, and assessment of the provision of employees with personal protective equipment by comparing the actually issued means with the labor or collective agreement, special clothing, special shoes, and other personal protective equipment, and other normative documents, assessing the compliance of personal protective equipment with the actual state of working conditions in the workplace and monitoring their quality. The evaluation of the actual status of working conditions fueled the card certification of workplaces, which provides a conclusion of the certification commission about certification. According to the results of certification of jobs are filled in statements of workplaces and results of their certification on working conditions in the division, containing information about the certified workplaces and working conditions on them, the number of employees employed in these conditions, their provision with personal protective equipment, consolidated statement of workplaces and results of their assessment on working conditions in the organization, which specifies the number of workplaces in structural divisions in the whole organization, the number of jobs which certified with their distribution by class conditions of work, the number of workers employed in jobs for which assessment information about the provision of employees with personal protective equipment. Certification of workplaces for compliance with labor protection requirements. According to the law on certification of products and services, certification is a procedure for confirming compliance, through which an organization independent of the manufacturer and consumer certifies in writing that the product meets the established requirements. Permanent workplaces at production facilities are also subject to certification for compliance with labor protection requirements. The Committee on Standardization, Metrology, and Certification of the Republic of Kazakhstan performs certification of production facilities, equipment for collective and individual protection for compliance with the requirements of state standards. So, certification is performed on the basis of certification of workplaces according to working conditions. There are three categories of conformity certification. A category number 1 certificate of conformity is issued if at least 90% of the jobs available at the production facility are certified, and the remaining jobs are provided with documents on organizational and technical measures that ensure their certification within 6 months after the certificate of conformity is issued. A category number 2 certificate of conformity is issued if at least 75% of the jobs available at the production facility are certified, and the remaining jobs are provided with documents on organizational and technical measures that ensure their certification with 1 year after the certificate of conformity is issued. And a category number 3 certificate of conformity is issued if at least 50% of the jobs available at the production facility are certified, and the remaining jobs are provided with documents on organizational and technical measures that ensure their certification within 2 years after the certificate of conformity is issued. In this case, the certification of jobs is made without taking into account the jobs that are in reserve. To get a certificate, you must have a labor protection service, implement a set of measures to ensure certification of production facilities, obtain positive conclusions from the territorial supervisory authorities on the compliance of the equipment controlled by these bodies with the requirements established by them, and, if necessary, also a permit or the right to carry out the type of activity. Send to the executive authority for labor of the subject of the Republic of Kazakhstan an application for certification of a production facility with the attachment of documentation on the results of workplace certification, positive conclusions of the territorial supervisory authorities, and, if necessary, a safety declaration. How the work is performed. Firstly, get acquainted with the object. Prepare a normative reference base for the certification of workplaces. Conduct an inventory of all workplaces with a list of dangerous and harmful factors of the production environment, indicators of the severity and intensity of the labor process. Make a tabular encoding of production, workshops, sites, and workplaces according to working conditions. Compare the measurement results of all hazardous and harmful factors with the established standards for them and determine the class of working conditions for each workplace. Check for security certificates of the established sample on production equipment and production line equipment, fixtures and tool requirements of normative legal acts and the assignment of conditions to a specific hazard class in accordance with classification conditions of risk of injury. Compare the actually issued personal protective equipment with the labor and collective agreement for the free issue of special clothing, special shoes, and other personal protective equipment to workers and employees and other regulatory documents. And the last one, issue the results of certification of workplaces for working conditions. In this slide, you can see the example of a map of workplaces certification on working conditions. There are two tasks for practical classes. Task number 1, carry out certification of workplaces on working conditions for a private enterprise specializing in the repair of vehicles. Task number 2, to spend certification of workplaces on working conditions for enterprises specializing in the production of food. And answers the following control questions. What is the purpose of workplace certification? What determines the goals and procedure for certification? What does the certification of production facilities include? Which jobs are subject to mandatory certification? Using the results of certification of workplaces on working conditions. Terms of certification. Certification commission of the enterprise. List the stages of work on the certification of workplaces by working conditions. In what cases the workplace is recognized certified, and registration of certification results. To answer these questions, you can use this recommended literature. Thank you for your time. Good luck and goodbye.